What's going on, ladies, gents, and kids of all ages? It is Eric coming back at you once again from the Nerd Cave, and today we are looking at another awesome deck list for Shimmering Skies. We've got some cool aggro stuff coming at you. This could be the best aggro option if you want to play aggro into this new set. I think aggro is a great option. There should be a lot of people playing Sapphire because Sapphire got some great new tools. Sapphire is still going to be really good, but when you can come hard aggro to the board, it's a good way to overcome them, and I think we may be entering a meta where we're seeing a little less Ruby Amethyst play because they, on the other hand, did not get a ton of new tools in the current set. Still a good deck, I think. I think it's still going to be something we're seeing in the meta, but I don't think it's going to be as prevalent as some other options. That being said, a huge shout out to the Patreons who make all the giveaways on this channel possible. We do have a giveaway coming up on the Patreon for a Maleficent Dragon, so now is a great time to join. We did also just release the Enchanted Be Prepared proxy artwork to download, so that's totally free to anybody who joins a paid tier on Patreon, as is all the other artwork, including the awesome playmat that you see in all of my videos. File is there to download. So if you are interested, definitely hop over, check out the Patreon. As mentioned, all of the funds that go into the Patreon do go 100% back to you in the form of giveaways. We do not make anything off of the Patreon, so that is all booster box giveaways, playmat giveaways, all that kind of stuff is funded through that. So again, thank you so much to the people who take the time. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's deck list. So the first card we're going to be running, and this is going to be a 4 of, is going to be Magic Broom Illuminary Keeper. 1/2 for 1, quest for 1. When you play another character, you may banish this character and draw a card. Always a great ability. With some of the new tools we got in set 5, there is some new synergy with this card that makes it really good, hence the 4 of. That new synergy does also play well with Turnabox Followers. 2/1, quest for 1. Whenever this character quests, you may banish them to draw a card. This is something you want to be taking advantage of, this and with the Broom. When you're going to have something threatening killing it, especially killing it favorably, that's when you want to go ahead and activate these abilities. If there's nothing on your opponent's board threatening killing it, you don't want to go ahead and activate it right away. Just get some quests in with it while you can, and then once there's that threat on board, go ahead and activate it. If you're playing against somebody running Ruby, they may have access to rush characters, so that may change some things a little bit. So if they do have that early game rush, or especially if you know they have that early game rush, maybe you want to activate it when there's not a character on the board. Then the absolute best new tool in Hyper Aggro, I'm so happy I opened several of these in my case, is going to be Daisy Duck Donald's Date. 1/4 for 1. It is uninkable, but it is going to quest for 2, and it has a quote-unquote drawback of an ability, but it's not that much of a drawback when you're coming to the board hard at the beginning of the game, and that's whenever this character quests, each opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a character card, they may put it in their hand, otherwise they put it on the bottom of their deck. It is worth noting that the actual ability triggering is not a may ability. The only may part of it is that they may put it in their hand. If it's a character, they can choose to deny that. They probably wouldn't, but you're gonna hit any non-character cards and send them to the bottom of their deck. So this is a great additional way to potentially get around things like Be Prepared if they are on the top deck when she quests in, and since pretty much every other card is going to be getting hit by her until she gets taken off the board, unless they're drawing in between there, you can really get a good chance of hitting in some of those threats, taking away their Fishbone Quill, stuff like that when it comes to Sapphire Ruby, taking away some of their songs when it comes to Steel Song, potentially taking away their Sleepy's Flute. So honestly, Daisy Duck, very good card. I've heard people say it's more of a threat to the meta than Bucky was. I don't know if I totally agree with that, but it is definitely very good. Next card we're going to talk about is going to be Maleficent Biding Her Time. 1/1, quest for 2, uninkable, comes down for 1. That's all it really has to be. A 1 cost that quests for 2 is still very good, even with something like Daisy in the meta. The more 1 cost you can get down questing for 2, the better. Then our last 1-drop in the deck, this is the most 1-drops I've ever put in a deck. There are 20 1-drops in this deck, is going to be Lilo. 1/1, quest for 2. Uninkable, comes down for 1, just like Maleficent. Same thing, but in Amber. I'm really happy I bought foil Lilos during the last set when they were like $4, because I'm pretty sure they're a lot more than $4 now. I'll throw a price on screen. I could be wrong, who knows. Then next up, jumping over to the 2-drop slot, we do have 4 Piglets. Super easy to fuel these with all the 1-drops in the deck to be able to get 3 characters on the board. But while you have 2 or more other characters in play other than Piglet, he is going to get +2 to his lore. He is a 2-cost inkable 2/2. So when he's not good, he's still inkable, which is crazy. I almost think this card should have been uninkable. It would have made him a lot harder to play in decks, but the card is very good. And he's going to come down turn 2, turn 3. You're definitely going to be able to get that third character on the board 90% of the time, and then you're going to be able to go ahead and take advantage of a quest for 3 if they don't out him with something like direct damage or brawl. Which, playing brawl against him definitely isn't the best thing, isn't going to feel the best for your opponent, because they're paying 3 to out a 2-cost character that frankly doesn't have evasive or anything like that. So even if he gets brawled, you're taking a resource out of your opponent's hand. He's still going 1 for 1. Then we do have 4 Madam Mim Snake, 3/3, quest for 1. I don't think she's a 4 of in every aggro deck. I think in an aggro deck like this, where you are so hyper focused on being able to protect those 1-cost characters, particularly those Lilos and Maleficents, Madam Mim is great. She's also a good way to erase damage on Daisy or ready her back up to avoid her getting taken out going into a following turn. So when you play this character, banish her, return another chosen character to your hand, and obviously a 3/3 stat line for 2 is crazy, and she is a quester for 1. And this is a card I've seen a lot of people arguing for a 4 of, but I did go ahead and go with a 3 of in this deck. I think in certain matchups it's just going to be inked. Like, I don't know if you want to be the one setting this off over and over again, and like in a hyper aggro mirror or against another heavy aggro deck. I think it's not going to be as good, but Amethyst Chromacon, 2 costs, each player may draw a card. So you are letting your opponent draw cards, which isn't always the greatest thing, but if you're able to come to the board harder with more high lore threats than your opponent is, it can definitely be really good. It's a good way to potentially close out a game when you have no cards left in your hand to draw 2 cards every turn instead of 1. You can potentially scrape back up and get those last few lore points to get across the line. Then a card I still think is necessary. I almost played 3 of these, but I had to cut to 2 just to get the deck down to 60, is going to be the 2-cost Bare Necessities. This is an action, a song, and chosen opponent reveals their hand, which is great in and of itself, because you're going to see what your opponent is doing, what they're working with, what your threats are coming later, so you can kind of try to play around those things, but you're going to be able to choose any non-character card and take it away from them. This is relevant for taking away things like Fishbone Quill, 1 Jump Ahead, stuff like that, that's going to let your opponent ink ramp early in the game to potentially prevent ink ramping against Sapphire. It's great, obviously, to take away those Be Prepared, Queen's Castles, stuff like that. That's going to be big threats. Queen's Castle is particularly hard for an aggro deck to deal with once it's on the board, so if you can take it out of their hand before it's on the board, that's always great. And again, something like Steel Song, you could potentially take away Grab Your Swords and some of those other things that are going to threaten you. Sleepy's Flute is always tough since you don't have item removal with this color combination, so being able to potentially grab those things away from them before they can play them, again, is always great. Bare Necessities I still think is going to be definitely a staple in the meta. Then one of our 2 bodyguards in this deck, and moving to the 3-drop slot, we do have 3 Donald Duck Musketeer Soldier. I think this is a card that started getting a little love at the end of set 4, but maybe didn't get as much love as it deserved, and so I think it's really going to have a strong place in the current meta, especially when it comes to those aggro decks. But it's a 2/3 bodyguard, quest for 1, and when you play this character, chosen character gets +1 lore. You can further take advantage of this with the bounce package if it is relevant, but mainly you're going to want to get him down on turn 3 to protect your field. If you can do something like turn 1 Lilo, turn 2 Piglet, turn 3 Donald, it's very threatening to your opponent. They may be able to go ahead and then get out something like Madam Mim Fox, out your Donald Duck, and unless they have another character on board, they're not really going to be able to do anything about your other characters, and he's giving you that extra lore point. So you're looking at going turn 1 Lilo, quest for 2 on turn 2, turn 2 Piglet, turn 3 you're going to be going ahead and questing for 6, so you're going to be pushing up to 8 in the first few turns of the game, which is always fantastic. Just to counteract some of those threats with more defense, and or to be able to go ahead and bounce back those 1/1s we talked about to keep them protected, or even to heal your Daisy, get it readied up to get ready for another quest. We do have 4 Madam Mim Fox. When you play this character, banish her or return a chosen character of yours to your hand. She does have Rush, 4/3 coming down for 3, quest for 1, and she is inkable. Easily still one of the best characters in Amethyst in my opinion. Then our other bodyguard in the deck, this did get cut to a 2 of, just to save on the uninkable count, but we do have 2 Blues, 0/3, quest for 1 comes down for 3. As I mentioned, it is uninkable, but it's a bodyguard, so it is going to be an alternative option to protect your field going into turn 3. And when the character is banished, you're going to gain 2 lores. And unless they're using something like Let It Go or Hades, that's going to put it in your inkwell, or I guess the new Cusco I think can hit characters and put them in your inkwell, or is that just for items and locations? That might just be for items and locations. But Baloo is going to come down. He's generally going to get banished as opposed to anything else happening to him, and when he does, he's going to get you 2 lore. Then a card I never thought I would cut to 3 of in an Amethyst deck, but it's just kind of what the deck dictates now. Honestly, in some instances, you may just end up inking this card because the card draw in this deck is fairly aggressive if you play it correctly. It's going to be Friends on the Other Side. 3 cost, action, song, draw 2 cards. You have some decent 3 drops in the deck that can go ahead and sing this. Bodyguard singing it is also great. Drawing 2 cards for 3 or potentially for free if you sing it is always gross. Then one of our 2 locations in the deck, we do have 3 libraries. This is the card I was talking about with the great synergy with Chernobog's Followers and also with Magic Broom, because they are going to be able to banish themselves as opposed to having to wait for your opponent to banish them and giving them the opportunity to take out the library first. But it's going to be a 3 cost inkable. Crazy that this card is inkable. 1 to move in, 8 willpower, which is crazy on turn 3. And whenever a character is banished, we'll hear you may draw a card, and it's netting you a lore every turn. I feel like this card kind of got the total package. I don't know if it should be netting you a lore or maybe it should be uninkable. I think those things would have balanced it out a little bit, but as it stands, it really is just the total package of a card. Getting those Chernobog's Followers and those Magic Brooms in there, then banishing them and drawing 2 cards for every single one is nutty. It's also why the deck's playing so many 1-drops, because if you can move them into the library, they're all just going to be replacing themselves. A staple in Amethyst, great way to close out games still, especially when you're at 17 or 18 lore, is going to be Merlin Goat. When you play this character and when he leaves play, gain 1 lore. The great thing about Merlin Goat is if you're at 17 lore, you're almost definitely going to have 4 ink, and so you're going to be able to go ahead and play him down for 4 ink. You're going to go to 18 when he hits the board with his come into play ability, Here I Come. When you play this character and when he leaves play, gain 1 lore. The 4/3 stat line is incredible, and the questing is great. So if you put him in a position where if they leave him on the board to quest next turn, you're going to 19 with him. If they banish him, you're going to 19 with him. There are risking, by leaving him on the board, the chance that you could potentially bounce him back to your hand with something like Madam Mim Snake and then play him down again, which is crazy, or just quest in and then bounce him is still going to get you to 20 when you're at 17 on that prior turn. So Merlin Goat, just a freaking fantastic option to close out a game. Even if your opponent removes him, he's still netting you 2 lore. Then next up in the 4-drop slot, we do have 2 Rafiki. He is uninkable, 4 cost, 1/4 with Rush, and he does quest for 2, which is great on a 4 cost character. That's part of why he kind of fit into this deck in that normally Merlin Rabbit slot, because we have a lot of earlier draw. So Merlin Rabbit drawing a card and only questing for 1 didn't seem as relevant. And when you play this character, he gains Challenger +4 this turn. So it's only for 1 turn, but he's potentially going to come down on turn 4 and be a 5/4 character with Rush that if your opponent can't out is going to quest for 2 on the next turn. Seems really good. He's absolutely crushing it in limited. If you ever see this in limited play, I mean like draft or a non-constructed format, Rafiki is going to be really good. He's going to be able to generally out something and potentially get you that quest for 2. If your opponent challenges into him, he is only going ahead and dealing 1 damage to them, so that is not as good. He is still a great card to out something very early in the game. He's just as threatening as something like Madam Mim Fox, but with that extra lore, makes him really good. Then next up in the 4-drop slot, we do have a 2/2. Again, this did replace Merlin Rabbit. It did help with the uninkable count in the deck by having 2 of those 4 costs go to being inkable, especially since we're adding in Daisy Duck, which is uninkable. He is a 2/2, quest for 2, but he is evasive, so that's going to make him a little bit harder for your opponent to take out. Obviously, if they use something like Brawl on him, it's pretty favorable for them if you're playing into that Ruby matchup. Steel can deal with him fairly easily. He can have a rough matchup in some instances. He may just be inking the inkwell in those matchups. However, even if they go ahead and banish him right away, he's kind of a 2-for-1 because he's going to take that action out of their hand. So he's going 1-for-1 with the action, and then he's drawing you a card. So even in that instance, it's not that much of a feel bad. And if they can't deal with him right away, he's potentially going to quest for 2. He can answer Diablo if they can't deal with him right away and get that banished off the board. So Bruni, I think, is pretty good. And then the last card in this deck, more of a later game draw option after you've been using something like the library, is going to be the Queen's Castle. Can be a great option to close out games, especially into those Sapphire matchups where they may not have strong enough characters to deal with it, particularly into Sapphire Steel, because they are going to struggle a little bit more with this in general since they don't have access to Maui or Hercules. Hercules has been a great new answer to the Queen's Castle. That's part of why we're on 3 of these. Queen's Castle, still a great option. It is gaining you a passive 2 lore. It is a 4 cost inkable, 1 to move in, 7 willpower, 2 lore every turn. It's crazy. And at the start of your turn, for each character you have here, you may go ahead and draw a card. I have played this card for a long time in Ruby Amethyst. If you can get that going, you're just going to be way ahead, foot completely on the gas, especially in Ruby Amethyst. It was gross. But in this deck, you could be coming to the board, new threats every turn just to close out the game. And, you know, stuff like Blue is a great way to close out the game. Merlin Goat's a great way to close out the game. So you have a lot of bomb options to close your game. So Queen's Castle just helps you get to those even sooner. But that is the deck. We'll go ahead and throw it up on screen. A little bit more hyper aggro. I love hyper aggro. It's great to see it making a resurgence in set 5 now that Bucky's not messing things up, now that not as many people are maybe playing Steel. Really great to see this deck making a comeback. Steel is struggling with it a little bit more because of Daisy Duck having that 4 defense. She's really been a great new answer to make this deck viable again, but I'm loving playing this deck. I'm looking forward to John running it at League on Sunday. Hopefully things go well for him. But if you enjoyed this deck, if you have thoughts on this deck, if you think my build was stupid, I should be playing like Rabbit or something, definitely drop those comments below. Let me know what you're thinking. I always love to hear it. And as I mentioned at the front of the video, if you want to support giveaways on the channel, help us do even bigger giveaways in the future, Patreon is a great way to do that. We make very little off of YouTube. Share us out. Tell your friends about the deck list. Tell your enemies. Everybody is welcome here. Get involved in the conversation. We're going to have a Facebook group coming very soon. Make sure you're going over and checking out that file for that Enchanted Be Prepared. We may even give some of those away in the future. And we do have a new playmat coming very soon, so stay tuned for that. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And when you see those toys, video games, and broken questers like Daisy Duck off in the distance, remember, it is not a mirage. You guys have a great day.